Well, welcome to the Inspire Life podcast. My name is Michael. I am your producer and co-host, and today I'm really excited to be interviewing Samantha Moe, and I'm actually going to do that kind of view so you can see both of us. And Samantha, I'll let you talk more about who you are and what you do, but your just presence and me knowing you, and I know you're great friends with my sister as well. It's an honor to be interviewing you today on the podcast and talk more about things that are important to us, anything from parenting to stay at home to where we're at. There's just a lot going on. 2020 has been quite the year so far. So a lot of processing and reflecting time to be done. But before we get into any of that, Samantha, if you can just please, start by introducing yourself and let our listeners know what it is that you do.
Nice. Thank you. Hey, everybody. So I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and my business is one where I offer certified parent coaching services to families who are trying to understand how to create more peace at home, particularly if they have an intense child. If you have one, you likely recognize them by that word intense right off the bat here. And I also train therapists, educators, and other child professionals how to become certified parent coaches in the curriculum that I created, because it's rooted in brain science and geared towards you helping parents have a step-by-step process that they can actually use to decrease meltdowns and tantrums and aggressive behavior.
Yeah, and I love that you really take a scientific approach to it, and you have obviously read and know a lot about the research and really effective strategies for parents. My girlfriend has 2 kids, and taking care of them, meltdowns happen here and there, but I'm grateful personally that we have some strategies with them that we're able to utilize. But maybe let's delve into that a little more. So when it comes to kids and stress and trauma, I've seen, you and your husband, Dr. Ty, I saw that you had done a TED Talk, and I think that's what it was, talking about, what it means to process stress as a child. Am I right? Or can you tell me more about that experience?
Yeah, so one of my roles is also as a motivational or professional speaker. And so the Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health invited me to do a mental health style TED Talk. So these are those 18-minute short talks that are designed to share an idea, where TEDx talks about sharing an idea worth spreading. So my topic was healing the silent family struggle, to call attention to the fact that when child professionals are working with intense children, it can be really easy to fall into a judgmental mindset. The thinking can be, I'm doing such good work at school or in this therapeutic setting with the kid, but then they go home and the work is undone, is kind of some of the behind the scenes with some people who haven't learned how to be non-judgmental, or they don't actually have the tactical strategies to help parents shift their behavior. And so it can come from this place of feeling at a loss, and that's where the stress can come into the professionals' lives. And so I did a talk on understanding, when you look at the lineage of stress, where does it come from? And I'm a huge believer, my keynote title is Beneath the Behaviors. So I'm a huge believer in, it's not just that we need to fix behaviors or fix a child's behavior, it's looking deeper underneath the behavior. And yes, this is true for children. So I graduated with my master's in communication disorders in 2004, and I worked in communication disorders with children with autism. And so I started seeing really quickly that what was going on beneath the behaviors of them not wanting to participate in social conversations or not having the skills was their sensory system was out of whack. So we needed to do things like me put them on a swing or smush them safely in between pillows and do some sensory and nervous system exercises, or get them moving on a scooter board to get kinesthetic input into their body. And now suddenly they weren't resistant and defiant and unwilling to learn new skills. It's that they weren't able to access that part of their brain because there was so much fight or flight going on, and them being really stuck in that. So beneath the behaviors is something that applies for children. And again, as a specialist in intensity, I love working with the families who have the strong-willed to special needs, children with special needs. it's also looking at what's going on beneath the behavior. And so my Healing the Silent Family Struggle talk is about looking at parents' behavior. So where does their stress come from and what is their lineage? And I'm surprised all the time in parent coaching by the vulnerability of a parent who says, so by the way, yes, I'm losing my cool with my kid and I know that's making behaviors worse, but and then they'll share something about the way that they were raised or a really challenging situation they're going through with the loss of a fetus or something that might be happening in the marriage. So really always looking at a holistic perspective. And so what I love about Dr. Mel and the work that you guys are doing at Inspire Life, similar to my husband's pediatric and neurological chiropractic work, is that I feel like chiropractic looks at what's happening beneath the behaviors and like working on it from the inside nervous system, that parasympathetic, sympathetic response, so that outwardly behavior and perspective shifts. Compared to parent coaching is so tactical and more about communication and hands-on strategies in a family scenario, that it's more like working on things from the outside so that it calms down that sympathetic stress response. And now everything's kind of working together.
It's super cool to hear. And, you know, you touched on it too, but that holistic mindset, right? A lot of times what's being expressed on the outside, it's really coming from something that's a deep layer that we need to get to. And like you said, with kids, the way you get there, I mean, there's many different strategies. I can't even imagine how many different ways there are to help a kid or a child just feel like they're in a space where they can express themselves openly and truthfully. And like you said, get more into that parasympathetic state, more slowed down and ready to process things in a way that's going to be, you know, constructive in the end. And another piece that you touched on too, that I think for, you know, parents or, you know, people working with children or honestly working with anyone, that judgment piece that you talked about, the judgment in itself, right, or assumptions per se, is honestly, it's a form of violence at the end of the day. It's a form of putting yourself and your agenda into the experience of someone else. So I really like that you touched on that. And, you know, coming from a non-judgmental and me with coaching, right? Like nonviolent communication, non-judgment, that's some of the hallmarks of this profession, and you as a coach as well. So, I mean, those things are definitely interconnected. And building off of that, I guess when it comes to working with parents and working with kids, you know, what are some of the big things that maybe would show up or would be happening that might spark, you know, myself or anyone else to say, hey, they got to talk to Samantha Moe because there's something going on here and I think she'll be able to help them out?
Yeah. I think I'm going to build on the nonviolent communication modality that you talked about.
Okay.
So what I've created, so what I'm hired for is the fact that I've created a system called the Mad to Glad Blueprint. So these are 8 online modules or pillars that parents can go through to learn, like, okay, what exactly is happening in my child's brain underneath the behavior? We talk a lot about fight or flight. Parents identify how their kid manifests this. And then we start talking about what are functional ways to actually calm that fiery response. But because I am working with parents and they're the ones doing the teaching, I'm no longer doing the hands-on work with children. I've created a report, a free email report that's I used to call it the 10 hidden landmines that parents accidentally step on. So here's how you can recognize if somebody would benefit from some parenting strategies that are not conventional, because we see that conventional discipline, conventional correction, those can all create more intensity and more retaliation because things already feel chaotic and out of control inside this child's mind and body. And so let me share one of these triggers right now, okay? So Michael, if you will please, I'm gonna ask you to close your eyes I'm gonna do an experiment for 20 seconds, all right? And I'm going to use a hidden landmine to let you experience what it feels like in your body as you're listening to me, all right? About 20 seconds. So anybody else following along here, if you're not driving and you're safe, close your eyes also. So just notice what's happening in your body. Here we go. No. Stop it. Knock it off. Oh, all the time no. I said no. No. Okay, open your eyes.
Ooh.
What'd you notice?
I like literally felt myself kind of like hunching a little forward, like my shoulders were even coming up. And for some reason, like between like my eyes and in my forehead, I felt like I don't know, it just felt like a like tension almost, not like pain or it wasn't sore, but it was just like, it was kind of like grr.
Yeah. And so there's four common responses to this known trigger that creates more stress in the body, and I'll share those four in a second. But basically, what we're doing is we're triggering kids by starting phrases with no.
Yeah.
The same thing is true when we overuse their names. So if you have a kid who's ever be like, mom, 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 hey, dad, 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 and they say your name 10 times in 5 seconds, you're like, oh my gosh, stop saying my name. Because it literally creates this chemical shift inside yourself. So this landmine of starting phrases with no definitely creates tension in the body. So I hear parents report that their kids, so as a chiropractor especially, like parents are saying like, my kid says that their tummy hurts or their head hurts. Well, where do we hold our stress? We hold it in our neck, a lot of us. We get those butterflies in our tummy. So rather than writing off, well, your kid's a hypochondriac and trying to get out of school, like, well, let's look at, are they impulsive? Are they high energy? Are they needing a lot of correction to stay on task all day long? If so, we want to learn how to do that in a positive way that doesn't create more stress. So tension is one of the responses. Another response for our intense kids is definitely the fight response. So some of you listening might be like, I don't even know this lady, and you're like lacing up your boxing gloves, like, don't tell me what to do. I know, that's a fight response. The third response is what we usually attribute to teenagers, but I see it in really little kids. I remember when my nephew was 3, he would just tune you out. He'd tune me out. So I'd be like, okay, time to stop coloring. Let's go. And he'd be like, do, 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 do. So he'd just keep doing his thing. So the tuning you out or the whatever response is another one from overcorrection or starting phrases with no. And then the fourth one we see with kids who are more empathic and emotionally sensitive. So these are the kids who they do feel it in their tummy or their heart. And you as an adult, if you're more of a pleaser, you might have felt like, oh no, I did that. I'm bad. I did something wrong. And so we see kids have this wilting response around, I used to say 5 years old up until about 2018. And I'm like, man, I'm seeing it from the 4-year-olds where they come home and they got the bad color on the behavior chart at school and parents say, what happened? And they say, I'm just a bad kid. So we want to be really aware that, violent communication, like, again, just talking about somebody else's model of nonviolent communication, it's not something that we do intentionally. We don't intentionally hurt somebody or become aggressive or, spew out shame, because we're not trying to hurt people's feelings. But when you have a child who has more of this fight or flight or this sympathetic response, they're hypervigilant, they're alert to all this information that you're not even directly saying. Like in their bodies, they can feel when your fist clenched, when you're frustrated, when you feel resentful. And so now it's about learning how to really positively communicate with them, including how do I correct and direct them, but in a way that doesn't work against your relationship or your child.
So powerful. And what you touched on too with the nonviolent communication too is even just kind of what I'm hearing is tone is a big part of it as well. And how you're starting off when it comes to, because at the end of the day we're helping our kids grow and learn, right? And part of that is making mistakes. So creating a space where that's okay and not having judgment or, like I said, violent communication, or just being really open with it. It sounds like that's part of the steps, especially when you recognize some of these response, understanding their behavior as, what am I doing to contribute to it? Did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, and what we're talking about as the first example is kind of like the harsh kind of way of communicating with somebody, like the very direct and firm way. And I just wanted to identify that the flip side of this doesn't necessarily mean, because I'm like hearing your listeners in my head, it doesn't necessarily mean that you get over soft. So when parents hear this exercise, they say, so what should I say if I'm not saying my kid's name? Should I be like, hey buddy, are you ready to turn off your game and come eat supper now? And I'm like, oh, wait, I got a second here, because starting like phrasing directions as a question or like as a, rather than a statement, like, let's turn your game off. It's time to come to dinner now. Like that can also trigger this retaliation, but because things have gotten too permissive. And so that's just the work that I'm doing in the world, is educating, like where's the space in between where you're allowed to have firm limits and authority in a way that's positive for you and your child. Because like, here's the other indicator that somebody might need some parent coaching or choose to do some of that personal growth, is that you might see a parent who feels exhausted and they're like, nothing works. And not the, I'm so mad at them, authoritarian, the way a lot of us were raised, like, you know, the parent with the stick who says you will obey me or you'll be punished. But also the parent who says, nothing seems to work anymore. And like, I don't want to give up, but it's like, I'm so worn down. So giving those parents also some really functional tactics.
I love it. And, you know, I like how you really touch on the importance of the boundaries, right? Like with children right there, if you're going to just let them walk all over you, well, then they're just going to keep walking all over you. And if you're too stern, there's the other side of it where maybe they'll hide things or not feel comfortable being open and honest. So it's about having boundaries on both sides and also finding that middle ground. And then two, recognizing within ourselves, right, as parents or people who are working with children, when am I fatigued to the point where I need support because I realize that it's not working. And I think what you touched on too, when you said that nothing works, right? Sometimes you just feel lost. You feel like you've tried everything. That's when it's time to maybe flip the switch mentally and say, hey, I need to work with a coach or someone to just find a different route, a different avenue. Because what I'm hearing is that there really always is the capacity to change, right? We know that when it comes to the chiropractic philosophy of the human body, when it comes to the way our society operates and who we are as people, change is the only constant. And there always will be a way to find a way forward. But sometimes you got to get creative and go outside the box.
Yeah, and it's looking at what's important to you, right? So people who come in Inspire Life, you ask them about their vision or their goals or their dreams, and you hear a range of answers, right? Like, I want to be physically active again, or I want to sleep well at night, or I just don't want to carry this burden of anxiety anymore, because you guys, this really gentle approach is good for all of those things. And so in parenting, we think about how easy it is to invest in something like swimming lessons, or it maybe not easy to invest in private school, but like, you know, like these things where this is important to me. I want my child to have this experience. And I love that there has been such a reduction in the stigma around people reaching out to mental health professionals and therapists, right? If you want to feel better and you want to feel some burden released and have some healing, that's the modality you go to. And in coaching, it's more like, I want to have peace and joy. And I want to remember my kids' childhood and them too, in a way that's positive, instead of feeling like we have to make up for lost time.
Oh, that's such a cool takeaway too, you know, recognizing where your values stand. And I mean, I think most of us can agree that peace and joy are values that a lot of us, especially right now, are really striving towards and want to accomplish. So excellent points and things to consider if you're in one of those kind of responsive and you know, in an area where there's a lot of growth that needs to be had, recognizing the power of coaching. So I have just one more question for you. And this is a question I ask all of our guests. So not sure if you've tuned into our podcast before, you may have heard it. What is just the one takeaway or the one thing you would leave our listeners with today?
Yes, of course, I've heard your podcast. My big takeaway is the thing that has surprised me most in the last 16 years of doing this work is how quickly kids' behavior changes when parents have the tools that aren't just designed to help their child, but they're the right match for that parent's personality. I'm talking 2 weeks. We start seeing changes in 2 weeks. So that would be my takeaway is, you know, there's so many processes that we know take time. We know that, you know, weight loss and health, regaining health, and like we were talking about with anxiety, like overcoming that takes time. And it's true, shifting your parenting approach or shifting your mindset takes time. I mean, all my coaching programs are 6 months long, but change starts in 2 weeks because kids are so responsive because of the mirror neurons in their brain where they reflect the state that you're in. You give me one session and you apply something for 2 weeks that's customized to you. And that's the takeaway, is just have hope. Things can change quickly.
Have hope. And yeah, I mean, back to chiropractic philosophy and with the nervous system, kids have only taken in so much stimuli, so that change can be catalyzed even quicker, especially when you're coming from a state of values that are between the two of you and finding, great strategies, like you said, personalized, that will end in good results as you continue to stick to it, right? And utilize that willpower and persistence through it. So Samantha, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, for sharing your wisdom with our listeners, for honestly bringing light to this world. You and Dr. Ty are just two of my favorite people. And there's, like we kind of started the episode with, there's a lot going on, but continuing to focus internally on how we are serving ourselves and serving the greater community, we'll get through it and we'll come out stronger together. So
we will. And thank you. You all over there are some of our favorite people as well. And I'm just realizing that some of your listeners, if they want to begin some of this growth work, they don't have to invest financially. They can do a little bit of learning. So that exercise I did earlier on like reasons and triggers why emotionally intense kids act out. I'm sure you guys will put this link in the show notes, but people can just go to samanthamoe.com/parents. And at the bottom, you'll see the free guide on beneath the behaviors, and you can look at those. They're now 11. There used to be 10. You can see those things so that you can begin becoming more aware.
Yes, that was my last question taken from me. So to get a hold of Samantha Moe, samanthamoe.com/parents, check out those free resources. I took my notes. I mean, one of my favorite parts of this podcast and being the interviewer and the producer is I get to learn a ton as we go. So as always, for all of our listeners, thanks again. Check out Samantha's website. And until next time, keep inspiring. Thank you.
Hey there, did you find value in today's episode? We sure hope so. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
Also, hop on over to Facebook and join the Inspired Living community. There, Dr. Mel and I share health and wellness tips to help you live your most inspired and thriving life.
And as always, keep inspiring.